this is Sarah SoiledPlant and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go over my Philodendron collection. I have 12 individual plants that I have in my possession and 10 different varieties that I'm going to share with you today. I will go over all things Philodendron in my collection. I've done a similar one to this for all of my Calathea, and I will link that below and in the card up above in case you're interested in that. I'm going to start off by sharing a couple of general care tips for philodendrons. There's always exceptions, and for the plants I show you, I will point those out as they come. But firstly, I want to talk about just light and water, the two basic pillars of any plant care. With philodendrons, generally speaking, they can go a little bit longer between waterings. That means you can have a few inches of dry soil before you re-water. Lighting-wise, philodendrons kind of go across the board. There are some that are very low light tolerant, but I've found that optimally most of them will prefer medium to bright indirect light. Some can tolerate direct light in certain conditions. All the ones that I have really prefer indirect light. Philodendrons really don't like to have their feet wet. They are susceptible to root rot. It helps a lot with philodendrons to have very airy soil so that you can prevent root rot. When I say airy soil, what I'm picturing is at least 50% of aerating material. That can be perlite, pumice, orchid bark. The easiest way to make a soil mix for these is to buy a good standard potting mix and then putting in 50-50 that plus your aerating mix. What I like to personally do is kind of split that aerating mix 50-50 between orchid bark and either pumice or perlite, depending on what your preference is, but they act about the same. I say mix 50-50 because orchid bark is a little bit bigger and it also retains moisture a little bit better than a pumice or a perlite can do. So it'll retain that moisture but allow really deep aeration. And having a mix that has bigger chunks in it means that your roots will be stronger. Bigger chunks allow for stronger roots. Because if you don't have as much aeration in there, your roots are going to be smaller and finer and thinner and more likely to break and can't sustain the plant nearly as much as like a big beefy root. And you're more likely to get big beefy roots with lots of aeration and bigger chunks mixed in to the soil, if that makes any sense at all. For temperature, I would say it needs to be above 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Most people will keep the plants in their homes, at least for part of the year, and it's no problem maintaining temperatures above that for people in their homes. I only bring up the low end of the temperature spectrum so that if you are bringing your plants outside in the summertime, you know about how cold it can withstand before you have to bring it in. So keep a close eye on your evening temperatures. If it starts getting close to about 55 at night, I would say start considering to bring those plants back in and reacclimatize themselves back to the house. So for ideal temperatures, I would say closer to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. You know, there's a wide range that it can thrive in. I just say, you know, around that temperature. It can do anything from probably 65 to 75 up to 80 even, and be very happy. I just pick something close in the middle, and that's about what temperature I keep my living quarters in. For fertilizing, I would only fertilize during the growing season. For those of us in the northern hemisphere, that generally means April to October. If you're closer to the equator, you could possibly even fertilize year-round if you do have a growing season year-round. And then if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's going to be basically the opposite of the northern hemisphere. Depending on your conditions and your fertilizer strength, I would either fertilize once every other week or once a month. The thing that I'm trying right now, I was fertilizing with an organic fertilizer every other week, and then now I'm trying out liquid dirt, if you've heard of that. I'm trying out using that for every watering and seeing how that goes. I haven't been using it long enough to make a determination whether it's great or terrible or whatever. But right now, I would probably still recommend you do either organic or heavily diluted fertilizer every other week. to every 4 weeks, somewhere in that range. There's not really a right or wrong way to do it, it's just whatever you feel comfortable with. For humidity, I would say for any heartleaf philodendrons, for clustering philodendrons, generally they will take anything as low as almost 20 or 30% humidity. The more rare philodendron, I would recommend closer to 40%, except in a few cases where they would do better with even higher. Philodendrons are native to South and Central America, so in general, when you're planning on what your setup is and your lighting conditions and things like that, you kind of have to take into consideration the environment it thrives in and try to replicate that as much as possible in order to optimize your growth. I do have all of my plants, and I'm going to show you kind of tentatively in like most common to most uncommon / rare, if you want to use the R word. The first philodendron I'd like to start with is my Philodendron Black Cardinal. This is the only philodendron I have that grows in this cluster formation. What that means is, I will show you outside of this cover pot here, but what that means is this growth pattern here where you have only one stalk in the center and it kind of comes out at all these angles from the top from one single point, but it's meant to stay low on the ground. It is not veining up or crawling. This is the only philodendron I have like this. Other examples of clustering philodendrons like this are, your Moonlight, Prince of Orange, Macaulay's Folly, Pink Princesses grow in this pattern. There's a lot of different color varieties. There are ones that are more red in tone, there's orange, there's lemon lime, there's pure green. This one that's more on the black side, variegated, non-variegated. It comes in a bunch of different colors, and I really like the Black Cardinal because of the deep dark foliage it has. Mine is not that insanely dark, and I think it's because I'm giving it too much light. Usually when you have a plant with super dark foliage, it generally doesn't need quite as much light because it holds on to the light it's given much more efficiently. The new growth on this plant is more of a pinky red, kind of orangey color, a little more on the pinky side, and then it deepens as it gets older. So you'll notice on this plant that I have a couple of leaves that are kind of permanently wrinkly. This has been a point of frustration for me, and I've mentioned that in a different video, which I will link below, about my problem stressful plants. This one made that list. Now usually wrinkly leaves are a symptom of either low humidity, insufficient light, or inconsistent watering. Those are the three things that generally will cause wrinkly leaves like this. Now, I know it's not humidity because I keep my humidity in my living area about 60% for my calatheas, so this one does not need humidity that high, so it shouldn't be wrinkling because of low humidity. The light I'm giving it is more than sufficient, enough to where my black in my Black Cardinal is turning more of a green instead of a black. So I know it's not the lighting, so I'm pretty sure it has to do with the watering. And I've been watering it fairly consistently, at least as far as when the soil dries out. I have a strong suspicion that the soil in this was compacted since I bought it, and it's not the best. It doesn't aerate very well. So I'm going to be changing the soil in this fairly soon, probably before it gets too late into the fall, so that it has the best fighting chance. Now on this newest leaf here, it is actually, that newest leaf here, it's actually growing in fairly well. It's not wrinkly at all, it's nice and smooth. So I think the watering problem has kind of resolved itself. I still think the soil in it is not very good, and I'd like to fix that and update it. But that is my Philodendron Black Cardinal, the only clustering philodendron that I own. Next up, I'm going to do my heartleaf philodendrons. I have a very soft spot in my heart for these. I love the way they look. And these are the kind of two most common versions of the heartleaf philodendron. They're also known as the heterasium. I know a lot of times the green standard heartleaf philodendron heterasium is sometimes mislabeled as a cordatum, and that is not accurate. A cordatum is actually a completely different plant, and they have much longer leaves. They kind of remind me of a Jose Bono. They are completely different. So this is actually a Philodendron heteroecium, and this is a Philodendron heteroecium lemon lime. So both of these can tolerate fairly low light. I would recommend to try and give it at least a medium indirect light, which is what I have them under. And this one has been going crazy. I'll take it out of the cover pot here so you can see it even a little bit better. But this one I took from some cuttings from my parents, and I love this plant a ton. But you'll notice all of these darker leaves in here. Those are the leaves I took cuttings from. I had about 8 of them, and all of this limey kind of green brand new ones up at top are all brand new this season, and it's definitely filled in and filled out, and it looks really, really cool, and I'm very happy with it. But it's like a line of demarcation. You can see the really dark stuff underneath and all the brand new stuff coming up, and it's kind of cool to see. Heteroecium are native to Central America and the Caribbean islands, and I wanted to show both of these side by side so you can kind of see the color difference between a regular heteroecium and the heteroecium lemon lime. One thing I did notice that is different is all of the stems and petioles on this are green, and on the lemon lime, the newer stems and newer growth, it's on the kind of peachy side or pinky orange side, and the new growth on these tend to be more on the orange to yellow color spectrum, and then they flesh out and get into this color green. Now you'll notice that there is on some of these leaves little green splotches. That's just because if it doesn't get quite enough light, it will throw some green in there as opposed to this lovely lemon lime color. So if you see that the plant is plenty healthy, it's just fine. Just give it a little bit more light if you can. Put it a couple inches closer to the window and you will be fine. When I water any of these heartleaf philodendrons, and I have a few more to show you, what I do instead of sticking my finger in soil or even using a moisture meter, what I do with these is I do what I call the lift test. The lift test is you take your pot and you pick it up without the cover pot and just kind of get a weight on it. What I do is when I go through and check every couple of days to see if they need water, what I will do is kind of pick this up and say, oh, plenty heavy, it's got enough water, I'm fine. If you lift it up and it is just super, super light, give it a good thorough watering. And usually the soil that I make is airy enough that I can thoroughly water that, slosh it through, and it will not overwater your plant. That's the benefit of having airy soil, is that you can kind of drench these whenever you do water them, and you are not at risk of overwatering. The only thing you're kind of risking, the only way to overwater with these is have them sitting in water in the bottom, but luckily with having cover pots or anything, even a terracotta pot, you can just flush these with water, let them drain until they start being drippy, and then pop them right in, and that's sufficient. So it's very hard to overwater these with the setup that I have. Here's my next heteroecium variety. And heteroecium, once again, is basically just the heart leaf vining philodendrons that have this leaf shape to it. And this one is the Brazil. So the Brazil has dark green on the outsides, a kind of medium green, and then a lime green in the center. Different patterns can kind of emerge, but for the most part, the lemon lime green is in the center, and it'll kind of spread or change depth depending on how much light you're giving it. And you'll notice on this back side here, I have a lot of lemon lime on some of these vines, and some of these are almost half moony type looks. This one's completely lemon lime. That is because for a few months I was giving this too much light, and some of that lemon lime was starting to take over the plant and almost turning into a completely lemon lime heartleaf philodendron like the one I just showed you. So what I did was I pulled this away from the window. So I have this little shelf that's maybe about 2.5 feet long, something like that, and all I did was take this from one side of that 2.5-foot shelf to the other side. Just that small movement has made it so that this plant would have that optimal variegation without too much lemon lime. So with this strand right here, I'll see if I can set this on my lap. So on this vine right here, you'll notice that we had some good variegation in the bottom, and then I started getting 3 leaves that are all very much lemon lime. So after I moved it, I got these 2 leaves, and they are much more in that Brazil color pattern. You can see the progression in one vine, sort of the different lighting conditions it has. I do really like this one, and it seems to grow even faster than any of my other heartleaf philodendrons. I don't know if that's just me, but it's growing really, really fast, and it's very satisfying to watch grow. Much like the lemon lime, the stems on it are more of an orangey to yellow kind of color, and the older stems that are further towards the center of the plant are green. My next heteroraceums are the Philodendron heteroraceum Micans. As far as scientific names go, this is actually interchangeable with the normal heartleaf philodendron, the green one without the velvety leaves, and this is just a different cultivar of that same plant. These are just as easy to care for as the regular heartleaf philodendrons. It's just these ones have a more autumnal look where it goes from sort of a reddish brown down to like a deep green. And I do love the colors that this throws, kind of what direction you look at with the light. It kind of changes colors a little bit from that reddy brown color down to the green with some yellows and oranges in there. It's super cool. The older leaves on it, I can show you on here, but the older leaves tend to go back to that orange color right before they're about to sort of shuffle this mortal coil. And here's one that's almost bright red. This one is on the way out. I could probably actually just pull that one off. Yep. So even when they are ready to kind of throw their leaves off, they kind of turn this beautiful red color. It's so interesting. I love plants. I bought these 2 at the exact same time, and you'll notice that this one is sizably different. This one I have in my bathroom with very, very good indirect light. And this one I just had near a western window. So these both were getting western light, just this one was in my bathroom with all that really nice reflection in the mirrors and white tile, and this one was just back a little ways. I've moved this to a south-facing window just to kind of see how it does and how it grows. That just goes to show what different light conditions can do. But both of them are happy and both of them are growing. This one is by no means struggling or sad or anything like that. This one is very happy too. It just ultimately depends on the light you give it. It will kind of grow a little faster or grow a little bit slower, but it's very hard to make these unhappy. So that is the Philodendron Micans. The last on my list for the heteroraceum group is my Cream Splash. This can be confused with Silver Stripe, with the Rio, and with it's called the Gabby, I want to say. They're all very, very similar. I do know that the Rio is actually a trademark by Gabriella Plants, so unless you have purchased a plant from Gabriella Plants, you do not have a Rio. You probably have either a Silver Stripe or a Cream Splash. I bought this from an online seller, and they labeled it as Cream Splash, so that is what I will assume I have. And this one is very similar to a Brazil, except instead of just having lemon lime, medium green, and dark green, this also adds a thin stripe of cream in there. Now you'll notice on some of these new growth points I have here that there's literally just a line down the center. So that is what happens when you don't give it enough light. When I ordered this, it came in the box and was in transit for about a week, and then I had a lot of stuff going on when this was kind of acclimatizing, and I didn't have it in optimal light when I was acclimatizing it to the house. So it went a few weeks to almost a month without getting good light, and so that's how that happens. You know, it still has the variegation, and hopefully the next leaves are better now that I've given it better light. I've actually put this in the spot that the Philodendron Brazil was in before it started throwing too much lemon lime, so I've got this in that spot now, and I'm hoping that it'll give me some of that really, really nice transitioned variegation. I'm still trying to find my happy spot for this. As far as care and whatnot is very much similar to all these other ones. That is my Philodendron Heteroecium Cream Splash. Now we're going to get into kind of my more exotic, elusive, harder to acquire, rare philodendrons. I'm going to start with my largest philodendron and quite honestly my favorite plant that I have. This is my Philodendron Plowmanii. Holy cow, this plant is huge and it's beautiful and wonderful. I won't go into how much I love this plant, even though I really do. Honestly, I think part of the reason I love it is just because how big it is. And if some of my other plants were as big and grandiose as this one, I'd probably love those just as much. But it's the only plant I have in the philodendron family that is super, super big and almost mature. I wouldn't say it's quite mature yet. It's getting there. It's kind of right in between. Plowmanii have these nice big heart-shaped leaves. Lots of really deep veining. Have these kind of dark green leaves. Now the silver kind of splashes in there is only present in juvenile forms of Plowmanii. When they're fully mature, they actually do not have those silver stripes anymore. These are confused with mammy all the time because of that silver striping. So if you're confused about what you have or which one you want, the mammy also is very, very similar, except it will hold on to that silver striping. The other difference is the petioles, which have these little tiny ruffles on either side. And the petiole itself is nice and flat. It has some roundness, but it makes almost like a flattened circle. And at the very top, next to the leaf, as the plant matures, it gets these little ruffles at the edge, almost like they're wearing like a ruffly shirt. It's super cute. And then the pattern on the petiole itself has this really cool, white kind of splashing in there that is kind of fun and gives it some really cool dimension. This is the first plant I'm going to introduce you to in my collection that is considered a crawling plant. I keep getting distracted and staring at this plant. It's so friggin' cool. Anyway, so a crawling plant, let's see if I can show you. Oh my gosh, this is so big. Okay, so a crawling plant is where the stem actually goes along the ground and the stem is actually not supporting the leaves at all. Most plants, the stem is either the full support of the leaf or it is an intermediate kind of support with the petioles coming off of a stem that's growing either up a tree or something like that. This one, the stem crawls along the ground, and then these coming up are actually the petioles and then the leaf on top. There's other philodendrons like this. I have another one in my collection that I'll show you. Plowmanii originates from Ecuador and Peru, if that's of interest to you. The leaves are on the glossy side, almost a little bit leathery, but it's not quite as stiff as some leathery leaves, so I would say it's, mostly on the glossy side. There's no velvet to this or matteness to it, really. It has a nice little shiny kind of quality to the front. The front of these leaves, I just love this because of how big and beautiful the leaves are. That beautiful heart shape, and you've got these little collar at the top here and this little opening. It's just so pretty. And I know big heart leaf plants are very popular. This one is super easy to grow. I've got it in a self-watering pot just because this thing is so heavy. It would be really hard to lift this and take it to the sink and back. So I put this into a big self-watering pot so I wouldn't have to pick it up and move it all the time. And it's been doing great in that. It's in a western facing window and it's produced all these big leaves for me. Since I've purchased this plant, this leaf I produced, this leaf, produced this little one, and this guy right here, this guy who's still hardening up over here. So he's doing very well. Also, I featured this one a lot, but I thought I'd show you just for consistency here. But this is a very little itty bitty baby Plowmanii. Basically, I took this one off of the mother plant when I potted that one up in the self-watering pot. This one was kind of growing off to the side, so I separated it out and made it its own plant. And this one's been doing very, very well, and it's been growing, and it's super cute, and it's got that same kind of silver splash on it because this is a baby. Next up on my list is the Philodendron Gloriosum. This one is still a baby, so this one has plenty of time to like grow up and get big. These are some of my more recent leaves here. And this is the only one that's still original to the plant. All the other these three are ones that I've grown myself. This one is also a crawling plant or a terrestrial plant where it has the stem along the bottom and then the petioles support the leaves up on top. This one I decided to, when I did pot it up, I decided to pot it up into a clear pot so I can get a gander at the roots all the time, make sure I can pot this up into something bigger once it gets root bound. But no, it's doing very well. It's got roots all over the place. It looks super happy. It's got a really, really healthy white root structure going on. The Gloriosum is native to Colombia, but can be found all over South America. These philodendron in particular really like medium to bright indirect light. It does not do as well with direct light. I'm still working out the exact lighting conditions for this plant. Some of these smaller growth here are from only having kind of low to medium light, and I'm trying to give it a little bit more to see how it does, because even with a nice healthy root structure, my leaves aren't getting any bigger at the moment. You know, I've got this one here, which is a little bit bigger than that one, which is about the same size. I don't want to crack these, but are about the same size as this leaf here. You'll notice on the newer growth that the petioles are that kind of peachy orange color, versus the mature ones, or the ones that are hardened and aren't new anymore, are that normal standard kind of green color. The other thing with Gloriosums is from the front, they do have kind of white veining, and it has a very subtly velvety texture. I would say it's not quite as velvety as on Micans, but it's in that echelon. You know, it's not like super fuzzy or anything like that, but it definitely has that sort of texture to it. And then on the opposite side of the leaf, the veins have that beautiful kind of pinky color, which is really, really nice. I think Gloriosums are super popular because they do have that standard, very highly sought after heart-shaped leaf look to them, and they have a velvety texture, and I know those two things in combination are very, very popular. So these are fairly sought after, but they're not insanely hard to find. Like everything else right now, things are insanely expensive, but if you are determined to get one, you can definitely get your hands on it. And that's true of any of the philodendrons in my collection. I don't have anything that's super hard to get a hold of. Yeah, that is the Philodendron Gloriosum. Medium to bright indirect light, heart-shaped leaf, velvety texture. I think that's mainly Philodendron Gloriosum. The next one I have here is a Philodendron Atabapoense. I've also heard it pronounced Atabapoense. Anyway, I call it Atabapoense. This one I really dig a lot. I love these kind of long, slender leaves that are kind of like a sword or a skinny spade or something like that. I really, really like the look of these. I do love the red undersides. This one is brand new and sort of hardening off. You can see kind of the striping, so it's transitioning its color from kind of a newborn Atabapoense leaf into a fully formed leaf. But generally speaking, Atabapoense are nice and green. They are very leathery and glossy. They're sturdy plants and they ship very well. I was very happy when I got this plant shipped to me. Really, really resilient plants. My leaves now are on the small side, and I think that was due to insufficient light. 9 times out of 10, if your leaves aren't big enough, give it more light. But when brand new Atabapoense leaves come out, they are like fluorescent highlighter, like red pink. And it is the most gorgeous color in the world. I absolutely dig it. And it retains most of that color on the back of the leaf. It's just the front turns green. And all of my leaves have this sort of shape to it where they kind of face upward to pick up that light. Now you'll also notice I have this one on a sphagnum moss pole. These ones are climbers. These are native to Brazil and Venezuela, and what these generally do is they are kind of under canopy plants, like most tropical plants that turn into house plants. They're mostly going to be these sort of under canopy kind of plants, because ultimately the plants that will survive in our homes are ones that don't need direct light. So what plants like this will do is they will kind of funnel along the ground, and as soon as they hit a tree or some other really big plant that they can grow up the side, they will grow up the side. So I'm kind of replicating that by having a moss pole in there with it. And even on the back side here, some of these roots are actually sticking out from the other side and going all the way through. So, and there's another little one up here. So it's kind of using that to grip onto. It encourages the plant to grow bigger leaves because it has that security and it's got that root growth. Now, Atabapoense gets confused with the Philodendron Billietiae or billeti, and it also has a similar, not exactly of course, but it has a similar look to the Spiritus Sancti, which is like a holy grail plant, super expensive, no one can really get access to them. This has a similar look to it, just like the Billietiae has a similar look to it. The main differences between this and the Billietiae are that the Billietiae has green backs instead of red backs. The Billietiae has a different growth structure. At least of the ones I've seen, it seems like it's almost, it doesn't vine up the same way. And most of the time I see those plants, they do not have a moss pole in them. And then the stems. The other thing is the stems on the Atabapoense are green and orange on the Billietiae. The Billietiae is on my wish list because I do really like the look of it and I love long leaves. This is the Atabapoense. Last but not least, I have my Philodendron Verrucosum. So this one is also a vining plant. It likes to grow up the side of trees. It's native to Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, so kind of all over South America. And these ones are also highly sought after by collectors. They generally like the, once again, heart-shaped leaf pattern to it. They really like, it has that sort of pseudo-velvety texture, much like a Gloriosum has. The back sides of the leaf and the front sides have kind of a deep red-brown in between the veining. The other piece that is kind of like a hit or miss with some people love it and some people don't, is the hairy petioles. It's also known as pubens, which is, you know, a lovely word. New vocab word for me, but yeah, this is the oldest leaf and it's got the kind of hairiest petiole going on, and then the newest leaf up here almost has no hairs coming up, but that's starting to peek out. So it's very much like growing out facial hair or whatever. The older the leaf is, the older the plant is, the more hair is on it. But this new leaf, even though when they first pop out they don't have any hair on the petiole, they will develop over time. The Verrucosum I found is one of the more finicky that I own. It really does not like to dry out too much between waterings. So unlike with the Heteroecium, I want to water this one a little bit more often, and I've also got it in a smaller pot, a terracotta pot, so I have to keep up on top of the watering for this one a little bit more. Also, for all of these kind of more rare philodendrons, I would say at least 40% humidity. With this one, I would say a minimum of 50, preferably closer to 60. luckily for me, I keep all of my kind of fancier philodendron in my greenhouse, so it has humidity closer to 70% to 80%, and it's doing very well in there. I did just notice right before filming this that the second oldest leaf I have had some mold growth on it, so clearly you can go kind of overkill. Luckily it was all surface mold and I was able to use alcohol and water to clean it off, and it seems just fine now. But just keep on top of that, I guess. I'm learning that now because I've had it in a high humidity environment for a long time and it's been doing just fine, but I guess too much is too much. These ones can also get really, really big eventually. I'm glad that, you know, I'm maintaining leaf size, but once again, if you have small leaves, that generally means that you should go for more light, and I'm giving it more light right now, so we'll see what the next couple of leaves do. If they get any bigger, we will see. Fingers crossed. But that concludes my collection. Thank you so much for watching my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!